Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brendiger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Jule Klapdor, a young woman I met a month ago at the Ian McGilchrist The Future of Humanity conference in London. And we had lunch with some friends, and then we sat together at the conference, and we really enjoyed our company. And I'm so glad that you're on here, Jule, and so glad to see you again and get to hear more of what your life is, and we can talk about whatever it is that we need to talk about. So, welcome to the podcast, and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for the lovely introduction. It was really lovely to meet you around a month ago in London. Um, I'm Jule, as Brett already said. I'm originally German. I live in Hamburg, Germany at the moment. And what do I do? So I think most of my day I spent with my full-time job. I work in a big tech consultancy company in the field of generative AI, where we're looking at how we can implement generative AI in for industrial clients. I have a background in cognitive psychology, which well led me to this topic with a couple of what's it called? I think that what's it called?
Transitions.
Thank you. In cognitive psychology, I was focusing mainly on the interaction of the human and technology and on creativity. Specifically, during COVID times, I was looking at how creativity can be enhanced if people don't go to the office anymore. Yet all these companies like Facebook, Google, that were investing a lot of money into creativity enhancing work environments, which nobody went to anymore due to COVID. So I was looking into virtual reality, and that's what got me closer to the technology field. So at the moment, I'm trying to apply that to artificial intelligence in one way or the other. That's for the main portion of my day. For the rest, I love philosophy. I love reading about philosophy, talking about philosophy, especially with Anthony, which is one of the friends Ed and I had lunch with in London. And I like to play music, which is a big part of my life. Like to read, like to talk to friends, and have great food and cook.
What instrument do you play?
I play the guitar and I sing.
And do you sing publicly, or do you just sing with friends?
Well, I used to sing publicly. I joined a band when I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. I took guitar classes at a guitar school, and our guitar teacher asked us if a friend and I if we wanted to join a band, and we just said yes. So we were terrible initially, but I think if you do it for a long time, you maybe start getting a little bit better. But yeah, music has always been a big part of my life. So I was in that band. We were playing pop and rock music. And then during my university time, I joined a jazz band, where I learned a lot about singing as well. It was a big change coming from pop and rock, then going to jazz. And I have to say, I was not really prepared for it, but I'm really happy I did it. Learned so much. And now since I live in Hamburg, I haven't joined a band or a music group, which I miss a lot. I think music is such a great balance to have in your life, especially when you're in front of your laptop all day. So I'm trying to get more into music again, but it's a bit difficult since I'm traveling a lot. So I can't really commit to go to band practice every week.
Did When you were playing jazz, did you have a particular style of jazz that you liked?
Sorry?
When you were playing jazz, did you have a particular style or genre of jazz that you liked?
Well, the band I was playing with was playing swing music, swing and jazz music, so old jazz classics, not improvised stuff, but mainly music people can dance to. And this is, I think, something that is always good to play as a band. When I was playing in the band before, my dad would always say we shouldn't play songs that are so slow because people want to move when they go into concerts, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
So you would have maybe learned some of Django Reinhardt's pieces.
We haven't played any of these pieces, but maybe in the future I would.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites, and he was certainly an innovator. Well,
Mhm.
um, so you've focused a lot, you've thought a lot about creativity in your life,
I
and
suppose so, yeah.
so tell me. tell me what you think creativity is, and maybe how we should think about it, or maybe we think about it wrongly, or I don't know. I'm just asking the question. I'm opening up the box, and we're going to let creativity out of the box and ask the question. Well, what is creativity? And
I wish that was the answer. Sorry, didn't want to interrupt you.
well, the question is, can everybody be creative?
Mm, okay, so first question, what is creativity? I have to say I was surprised when I started researching the topic that we don't have one clear definition of creativity. There are several definitions out there that I don't remember word for word. Um, but what I found striking is that um, I think in order to really define what creativity is, or maybe it comes along with it, but we also need ways to measure creativity, and that kind of goes hand in hand. If we know how to measure it, we'll also know how to define it. Um, and I remember, I mean, this was a few years ago. I haven't looked at this into this for a while, but there was divergent thinking and convergent thinking. I think that was one of the main distinctions in creativity. And convergent thinking, please, for people listening, I don't have the definition in front of me, but it was something like for convergent thinking is you start with an idea or question, you can basically go into any direction and also create ideas that are completely different from your initial standpoint. You're not really limited by any constraints. And then you get divergent thinking. Am I mixing it up now? I'm not sure
Yeah,
anymore. But you get a divergent.
it's described as divergent thinking, which
Oh
can
yeah, sorry.
it can go in. It's diverse.
Mm,
It's diverse thinking, and yeah, but
sorry.
convergent is the opposite
Mhm.
end.
Exactly, that was the opposite. So when we did the research, first has to start with, okay, so what do we want to focus on in the research on creativity? And I think I don't remember now exactly, but there's one way of this thinking that most of the research has focused on. So that's what we decided on. But I found while I was doing the research, it is very it feels a bit unsatisfying to research creativity because in the beginning that is such a broad concept. And there's so many different ways to measure creativity and to define creativity. And in the end, you're doing research on one small part of creativity and making um, claims about creativity as a concept, um, which of course you got to be really careful with. Um, but I'm excited to see what people that are full-time creativity research come up with in the future, and if we can find a better way to define creativity. I know I haven't answered your question concretely, but these are the things that are on top of my mind when I think about the research on creativity.
Well, what it prompts me to think is that creativity is is more than simply seeing something new with a process or with an object. I've got a coffee cup here. So
Mm.
what does it mean for me to be creative with this coffee cup? Well, other than putting coffee in it, it could become a flower pot, for
Mm.
example. So it's changing the use of something that may elevate its beauty or its usefulness or its value. I think that's part of what creativity is.
That's one of the activities we did as well to measure creativity that we decided on in the end. We had this task. It was not a coffee pot. We decided for something else, but then we let people come up with ideas of how you could use that, let's say, coffee pot in different ways. And then we had to, or a few raters were rating these ideas according to a few criteria, including usefulness, I think novelty, um, originality. I think we had around 5 or 6 criteria.
Right.
Um, sorry?
Right. Yes, correct. Yeah.
There was a study by a researcher from Italy, Alicia Ceruti, I think was her name. Um, she's from Milan and she was doing some really interesting research on awe and creativity. So we worked together with her to create a questionnaire that would fit our activity or our research study very well.
Very interesting. Do you feel like you're a creative person?
Yeah, I think so.
And how do you manifest creativity in what you do?
So when I think about creativity about myself, disregarding the science I read about it, I think it's to a certain extent flexibility. Flexibility and well, creativity. I don't want to use that word now, but when I'm put into a situation um and I don't have a clear way forward, I think I tend to come up with new ways of solving that issue quite fast and ways that are also unconventional. And I think that's a big part of creativity. Of course, you get the artistic creativity as well. And I think when you just look at that, hey, can you paint a can paint an original picture? It's like I've always liked these kind of things and expressing some kind of concepts or ideas that you have in your head, either through music or through art, or maybe even through poetry. I'm not a poet or anything, but I like to think about nice words that rhyme. I like languages. So I think these would all be factors that would positively influence creativity.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've had a number of poets on the podcast, and they're interesting. They're very interesting people. They're very creative,
Mhm.
and what led them into poetry is, many different things. In one case, the woman had been was a it's a PhD in chemistry, and she ran a vaccine manufacturing plant for a
Mhm.
pharmaceutical company, and she left that and became a poet and an artist. I love that sort of freedom to be creative with your own life, which is different than being creative with a pen and pencil, paper or paints or music or something like that. If you're creative with your whole life, then all of a sudden your life is a tapestry that you spend the rest of your life painting.
Absolutely. No, that is right. I was reflecting with a friend a few days ago, and a lot of people might disagree with that, but we're just having a little thought experiment. You know how in business, a lot of the I kind of feel like sometimes when I'm in business conversation that a lot of the answers I get are pre-scripted, that people know how to respond in a certain context. And you can always say with, I don't know, 90% certainty that if you say a certain thing, people will respond in a certain way. And we're reflecting how that manifests in creativity and free will. Does it mean that um, if you're in a conversation that feels scripted, is that an uncreative conversation? Is that a conversation that maybe um, works against the concept of free will because it's so predictable what the other person might say, or you know that you're supposed to say something and you will do it? Just an open question to put out there. I thought it was quite fun to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a very important insight, and I didn't see that when I started the podcast, but a, a few months into it, I had some people who reflected exactly what you just said. They said, "You realize what you have here?" I said, "What do I have here?" He said, "You have an unscripted conversation."
Ah, yeah.
I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" And it's exactly what you said, which is everything in our life is scripted, and there's an outcome, there's an agenda, there's a purpose. It's all kind of regimented in a particular direction.
Mm,
You're saying we don't have to do that.
maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, in the end, I don't know. I'm just wondering. I'm a active learner in life and seeing what we have to do and what we don't have to do. But I do see a lot of predictability in a lot of meetings I'm attending.
Well, because they have an outcome they want to achieve,
Yeah.
a predetermined outcome.
And I mean, which is great. This is how it works, right? We gotta achieve our outcomes. We gotta structure our meetings in a way that everybody's comfortable with. And I suppose if everybody just starts talking in very unpredictable ways, you're not going to be very effective in your meeting. But what does it mean for creativity? Creativity is, of course, not always required, but when it is required, maybe we should have unscripted conversation like the ones we're having right now.
One of the first things I learned when I became a consultant was how the structure of organizations dominate everything else.
How structure dominates everything you said.
Structure of organizations
Mm,
dominate everything else. They dominate idea creation, they dominate relationships, they dominate how how things get done. because the structure is the agenda.
Mhm.
And 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 what my assessment is that when you're in a structure dominated industry or a company, the the middle ground, a mediocre ground is where you end up because you're not going to take any risk, but you're also going to mitigate risk, and so you're just going to try to stay on the golden mean and nowhere else. And that's
Mhm.
not there's not much creativity in that.
How did that realization impact you?
Well, in places where I had worked before, it led me out of those places. And
Mm.
um, I mean, when I was younger, um, when I was younger and I was pastoring churches, I realized that the churches were structured just like businesses were structured, and the structure was organized to produce stability.
Mm.
And stability oftentimes means you're not going to change, and therefore you're not going to be in a position to adapt to opportunities, take advantage of opportunities that may come along, because you're committed to this structure and this. We've always done it this way, and we look at the past as the defining thing that says this is how we do it. And so when I realized that I was really much more of a change agent, I said, okay, I need to go in a different direction.
Mm.
And I found myself in higher education, and that was good. But even after 7 years of being in higher education, it was the same sort of thing. We're gonna we don't want to elevate anybody above anyone else. We're gonna do things, and we're just gonna kind of stay steady on our course. And does that work? Sometimes it does, but oftentimes, particularly in a volatile environment like we're in now, it's not very good. So I'm just saying that creativity is really important, and
Mm.
part of that is the willingness to accept change as a factor, which is a benefit to whatever you're doing.
How do you feel creative industries, I don't know, maybe design agencies fall into that category? Do you think they're creative enough at the moment?
I think they're well, I don't know a lot and at a level of depth, but my guess is that those agencies are just like every other organization, and they're
Mm.
trapped in the structure, the scripted structure of business. And so
Mm.
they get to do what they're paid to do.
Mm.
I was a consultant. I got to do what I was paid to do. What I
Mm.
really wanted to do was I was never paid to do, and
How do you
that's what I'm doing now. So
having conversations?
what's that?
Having unscripted conversations?
The unscripted conversation.
Mhm.
And the way I would say it as a consultant is that what I found was I'm overstating it, but basically, leadership would lie to me, say, "Yeah, we got a problem here. We want you to help us to solve this." And when the solution was became apparent, they said, "Well, we're not going to do that."
Mm.
I walked
Mhm.
away from the solution, and so they accepted the way things were, even though they were suboptimal.
Mhm.
And I think it's led us to where we are today, which is um, a lot of change going on that was not is not welcomed by people, and
There isn't a lot going on, yeah.
it is so it's an interesting time. Um, so how do you see? I mean, you're very engaged in the world of AI. How do you
Mhm.
see AI serving organizations if they have a desire to be creative?
If they have a desire to be creative, you say.
If the leadership of the company says we need to be more creative in what we're doing, how can we use AI to be creative, or can we?
It's a good question. I suppose that's how you define creativity, which brings us back to the beginning of our conversation. So if you want to talk about just let's say product design, we could probably use AI to design certain products or generate new ideas for product design. Um, we could have it come up with random word associations that maybe trigger something within us. But even though I work in the space of AI, I'm still a big fan of human creativity. And I think the more we interact with technology um, in front of a laptop, the more we're drawn away from our creative potential. If you look at the research, it says like nature, for example, is a big enhancer of creativity. Just and taking a walk in the forest, seeing the big trees around you, especially effective apparently are mountaintops, according to some research. Um, so I think maybe we need to regain trust in our own creativity and coming up with solutions without the aid of creativity, sorry, without the aid of technology. That's what my human side is saying. On the job side, of course, there's several use cases that you could look into for creativity, but that will depend on the industry and on the specific creativity that you require in that instance.
So my guess is that defining what creativity means has a lot to do with defining how we understand the work that we do. Who are we? It requires us to define who we are and who we are as a collective, as a company,
Mm,
or as a community, or as a nation, or whatever you want to call it.
mm.
But together we need to say, well, this is what this means. And we can use the technology to help us, but we don't want to become the servants to the Lord of the technology.
Well, that's my opinion. And of course, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I suppose a
Yeah.
lot of people agree that we don't want to be servants to technology. And I was just thinking of one thing in terms of creativity in the work environment. I was in a conversation with a few designers, I think two weeks ago, and we were talking about creativity as well. And this designer said that the really creative people are not in the offices. And we had a bit of a debate about it because I'm an office person. I consider myself creative. I'm not sure like how I measure against other creatives. But yeah, the designer was convinced that if you're in an office, you cannot be creative. I think again, going back to the point, what is creativity? So problem solving is also for me a creative act and being confronted with, I don't know, what's the future of your organization? What's the future of technology? All these questions require creative thinking as well. Um, so yeah, just wanted to add that to our unscripted conversation.
I agree with that. Yeah. And I went into business for myself because I realized that I needed to be fully responsible for what I do.
Mhm.
And and I wanted to be fully engaged in being able to do whatever I felt necessary to forward my sense of purpose.
Mhm.
And and that's when I started my consulting practice in 1995. And it was the best thing I could have done. And everything that I have in my grasp now is a product of that decision 30 years ago. Because the decision to leave where I was began a year before we left, before our family left. And it's it's an interesting journey to see when you allow yourself the freedom to be creative, not just in the creativity of writing a paper or designing an ad campaign or something like that, but to be totally creative in defining what your life can be.
How does creativity relate to purpose?
I would say the purpose is what your purpose is a focal point where your values matter. The purpose is the focal point of your values in action. And out of purpose comes a mission. So my purpose is to encourage people to take personal initiative to create impact in their local communities. That's my purpose. My mission is to do that by writing, and by talking to people, by having a podcast, by
Mm,
encouraging people. And when I wrote my book, Circle of Impact, I don't have one handy. In the introduction, I was at prior to writing the introduction, someone asked me, "Well, I know what your purpose is, but what is your goal?"
mhm,
And that struck me that I didn't have a goal because I wasn't. It wasn't that I wasn't goal oriented. It was that I was going to do whatever I was going to do for the rest of my life, and
mhm,
it did whatever the goal was. It didn't matter. And so as I thought about it, so this idea of people taking personal initiative to create impact is the act of creativity at its most basic level. And I see that in that sense that that definition is for me what leadership is. Leadership is taking personal initiative to create impact in your local community. And
mhm.
so that's how we create. We're creative. So when I see that as my purpose, and the goal became during my lifetime, I want to see 1% of the world's population take 1% take personal initiative to create impact in their local communities.
That's lovely.
And then I was asked, "Well, how are you going to do that?"
Mhm,
I said, "I don't think I can do that. It's up to other people to do that. I can talk about it. I can I can encourage that. I can help people develop that. But ultimately, I have no control over what 750, 800 million people do. I think that's about 1% of 8 billion. And I don't have that. I don't have that. That's not within my grasp to be able to do that. And I'm fine with that. I don't have any ego invested in the goal.
mhm.
But what I see is that it's happening. I'm seeing it happen. And I would say that it is the product of not people being intentional about being creative, but rather the circumstances that are their life demand that they become more creative in order to solve their problems and find pathways to a better life for themselves.
When you speak to people, and I mean, you say 1% of the population, you want them to take initiative in their personal community or might make an impact. And you're having this conversation, and as I understand, you want to inspire people to make that impact. What do you see in terms of intention behavior gap with the people you speak to?
I would say that the gap of the intention behavior gap is what we call learning.
Mhm,
Because I'm assuming, I mean, I'm basing this assumption on my own experience. I'm assuming that I may have the intention of being a creative person or being a person who takes personal initiative to create, but I don't know what that means.
mhm,
I have to go learn how to do that.
mhm.
As I learn, that gap is filled, and I begin to see things, and from what I see is that impact. I'm learning from that. You know, here I am at the age of 71, and I've learned more in the last 2, 3 years than I did in the previous 60, 68, 69 years. And I think it's because I pushed myself I jumped out of, I stopped sitting in a chair on the pool deck and I jumped into the water and was forced to swim.
Mhm.
And that really started 10 years ago. But so I guess the thing I would say is that for anyone that's listening to this, there is nothing that's holding you back from being creative or being a person of impact except your own um, reticence.
Mhm. There's this interesting research on the intention behavior gap as well from a Dutch psychologist. I think it was Rob Holland, who was talking about implementation intentions, which I found really
Oh,
interesting.
okay. Yeah.
Have you heard of that concept?
No, I'm interested. I'm
So. he was observing that a lot of people have all these great intentions and they want to go out and do positive things in the world. Might it be influencing your local community, but even starting with, hey, I'm going to go for a run tomorrow morning. And it is so difficult to move from intention to behavior in a lot of cases, to adapt your behavior to change a certain ideal that you're striving to achieve. So he was researching that topic, and what he found is that if you set implementation intentions, um, that the effectiveness of your intention becomes a lot higher. And what an implementation intention is to really think through the process, every single step you're going to take to achieve that certain goal. So let's say, for example, I have the goal I want to go running tomorrow. So I start with envisioning in my mind and seeing the pictures in my head. So like, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to set the alarm at 7 a.m. I'm gonna be out of bed by 7:01. I'm going to walk into my kitchen and prepare a quick breakfast consisting of a banana and I don't know, some granola. And then I'm gonna go right away, have one sip of water on the way, put my shoes on and go outside. And the more detail you go, the more your brain can prepare for that actual
Huh.
for that activity the next day. And then you don't only do it in your head, you write it down, you speak to people about it. The more senses are involved, or the more don't have the right word for it. I think senses works. The more it is implemented in your brain and kind of pre-programmed that you're going to do this tomorrow, and it is super effective. While I was writing my master thesis, I was doing that a lot. I had a lot of things going on. I was doing the master thesis. I was working two part-time jobs. I was still studying. I was taking extra courses. It was too much. For some time, I was working from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And that was very, very unsustainable for some time, but luckily just a very short period of time. But these implementation intentions, they helped me be so effective in that time and really get all the things done because I had the intention and I knew exactly how I was going to do them the next day.
Is there built into that process? Like I have the intention of walking every morning.
Mhm.
Uh, I have I have I've had hip issues, had a hip surgery this year. But I need to walk every day,
Mhm.
and I really need to start my day walking.
Mhm.
Is part of this attention behavior gap process identifying what success is? I mean, for example, I went out and walked this morning,
Mhm.
and I I knew that by the time I was done, I had accomplished my goal. And so I
Mhm.
felt okay, this is good. This has started my day on a positive note. And now I'll get to talk to Jule and I'll get to talk to I have another person to interview today. And all these other things are going to happen today are going to be really positive because I started it off with something I really need to do for my health. It's really personal. And so here I am. I'm in a much better frame of mind because I did it than if I had not done it.
Well, I'm not sure if he talks about this in the research, but I can very much relate to that. It's just like the satisfaction of ticking up something from your to-do list, right? That
Yeah.
at least gives me a lot of feeling of achievement. And
So
also,
the question becomes, what does it take for a person to become goal oriented rather than whatever not being goal oriented actually is? Because that's what we're talking about. How do you set goals and that are such that you can go meet them and find the satisfaction, the joy, the pleasure in meeting the goal? How do we do that?
I think we should break down the goals. A lot of people, I suppose, have very big goals, and they miss all the steps they need to take to achieve that goal. So I think breaking it down into chunks that we know we can achieve in a certain period of time will help us achieve that. So let's say we want to um, publish a book. Maybe we can, I think we need to know ourselves and need to know what we're capable of achieving one day. And then we can start, for example, writing to-do list for the day and saying like, okay, so let's say in 1 year, I want to have my book published. That means that at that date, I need to be have my first draft done. I don't know, do some backward chaining, break it down into more and more smaller pieces. And then, for example, one to-do list for the day might be today I'm gonna read 2 articles on a certain topic and write notes on it, and that's it. And not to overload us with goals that are too big and unattainable within a day or a week. And I think everybody probably needs to find their own zone of comfort there to say, do we want to set goals for the week? Do we want to set goals for the day, or maybe even goals for the hour? How do I work best? And I think also I'm not sure which hormones are exactly released when we achieve a goal. Let's just say, oh no, I'm not going to say anything wrong here. I'm a cognitive psychologist. I shouldn't say anything wrong. And let's say if we need that kick every once, or let's say every 2 hours of saying like, hey, I've achieved a goal to get us going, then maybe we should set goals that are smaller. If we say if I have one achievement a week and that will keep me going and very motivated, maybe that's also another strategy that could work. Set one goal per week and see how you achieve that. That will be my take.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I I I really like it because it forces us out of this scripted nature of life, that we're all trying to converge. We're going to come back to that word. We're going to converge at the same point, and everybody is going to be the same, and everybody's going to do the same, and therefore no one will stand out. When if we're creative and we're diverging from the norm, or from I coined a phrase a couple of weeks ago, systems of typicality. If
Mhm.
we diverge from the systems of typicality, we become atypical, and therefore we become someone that others can look at and say, they have something that I want, or something that I want to understand.
Mhm.
And then I think that opens us up to all kinds of ways to be creative.
So when we're talking about scriptedness, I suppose when we talk about creativity and relate that to the goal-oriented conversation we had right now, in a way, wouldn't that mean then if we're creating a script for ourselves by creating a to-do list, that would diminish our creativity again? Is that your point?
I think there is a point where the two have to come together,
Yeah.
and we need to be open to possibilities
Mhm.
and focused on what it takes to fulfill the possibility.
Mhm. I think that's the perfect balance.
I hope so, because that's the way I've operated. And it's not simple. It really is not simple, because let's say you have your job and you have your home life, and then you have this vision, this purpose, this mission that
Mhm.
that transcends all of that. This is the thing that you see pursuing that will define your life.
Mhm.
And and that's unscripted. It's a vision, but it's unscripted at this point. And so in order to manage the work and the home life, and to get to that, you have to then begin to script it out so that it's it has some kind of balance between all those factors in our life. And
Mhm.
maybe we find this is really not feasible, or maybe it means, and this is what I did. You start all over, and that's what I did 10 years ago. I started all over again. Ended
Mhm.
ended consulting, ended coaching, ended most of the leadership stuff I was doing, and
Mhm.
and moved. I moved across the country, started all over, and
Mhm.
I was free. And where did it take me? It took me into writing, and it took me all over the world. So in the last 10 years, I've been to 16 countries,
Mhm.
and have met people like you all over the world, and
Mhm.
and so the the creativity that comes from that, from meeting all these people, is that I am a different person than I was 10 years ago,
Mhm.
and but I'm also the same person.
Mhm.
So, see, I think that's the thing that we're talking about, is there's creativity, but there's also this form that needs to kind of coalesce around that creativity, allows the creativity to take some shape so that it's sustainable.
I suppose if you look at it through an organizational context, you could also just separate that into phases as well. I mean, if you want to, let's say, develop a new product, you'll meet an ideation phase in the beginning, and this is where a lot of creativity is allowed. And then you put more constraints on it as you um, move to actually implementing that goal or creating that product, which naturally brings a lot more constraints with it. So I suppose, depending on the context, you could either have these streams run in parallel, or you have different phases of more or less creativity, again, depending on how you define creativity.
Well, let's take this one step further, and let's bring in Ian McGilchrist's asymmetrical brain theory of the right and left brain. So it is clear to me that there are a lot of people who are creative who live in the left hemisphere.
Mm.
They're very analytical, and their analytical stuff is really brilliant, and they're creating ideas and models and systems that are extraordinarily influential,
Mhm.
but they may not be very practical.
Mhm.
And those then there are those who live out of the sensory experience of their bodies, and they're learning, and out of that comes ideas, notions that at first do not have an articulation, but it has a feeling. I said, so what is it? I mean, let me give you one example.
Sorry, one second. Does your audience know the differentiation between the left and right brain thinking?
Uh,
Maybe you want to
a
example.
lot of them will. Yeah, I've talked about Ian McGilchrist before. So we'll just say this. Left brain is very analytical thinking, very more narrow. And right brain thinking is much more intuitive, much more driven by how the sensory nature of our bodies react to the world. And I would say that the experience of life is a nonverbal experience of experiencing reality, and we learn from that, and it's a beautiful thing. And what we really need is the way to bring the two together. So I hope that's enough
Mhm.
explanation. So what I'm saying is that I think that that what doing things, experiencing life, um, getting on a plane and flying to Hamburg and going to the Elbe Philharmonie and seeing a concert of this world-class orchestra in a brand new world-class concert hall
Mhm.
is going to change your life.
Mhm.
Um, I got on a plane and I flew to Nairobi, Kenya in
Mhm.
2019, and it changed my life. The experiences we have, I think, are the experiences we have become the real fuel for creativity. I guess that's what I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, and that reminds me of the awe research again. So that research I mentioned earlier from Milan was investigating the relationship between awe enhancing, no, awe inducing, sorry, awe inducing experiences and creativity. And
Right.
especially these moments that where we experience awe, they can broaden our thinking and open us up to thinking about concepts in entirely new ways. So I think I would hope that your experience in the phenomenon is very awe-inspiring. And
Well, it's no question that it won't be because I've seen enough video concerts to know
Mhm.
that. But I think that another thing to say about this is that um, we also invest a lot of value in the big experience, you know,
Mhm.
the grand ecstatic experience of like going to a Taylor Swift concert. That's a big experience and it's life changing. But then there are also these experiences which are small, which are just as defining. And I'll give you one. I was with my daughter and her husband and their son, my grandson, this weekend. My grandson's 19 months. And we went to this indoor playground, and it has this big jungle gym thing with slides that are tubes, they're and so we're there, and my daughter takes grandson up, and they've come down the tube, and they do that, and he jumps out of her lap, and he runs back up, and she runs back up, and they come down again. They do that 2 or 3 times, and then she goes back up, and he follows her up, and then she lets him go down by himself, and he loves it. He's yelling, screaming, and he's having a great time. He immediately gets up and goes back up, and he does it again, and he does it again, and then, and I'm sitting there lying down on the platform where the tube opens with my camera, and he comes down, and then he turns around and walks back up the tube
Mm-hmm.
he had never done before. And it was like I'm watching his life change in that moment because he has now learned to have confidence in a place where 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before, he may have had more fear because it's such a, an ecstatic experience. And to watch him climb and fall and climb and fall, that learning experience to me was just a wonderful, and it was a great moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful.
So he was being creative in trying to learn how to do something which had never been available to him. And he's now physically, as a 19-month-old, physically able to go do that.
Yeah,
And I
that's
know
great.
that there's going to be all kinds of things like that for the rest of his life.
Mhm. And even if that maybe was not awe-inspiring for you, maybe it was awe-inspiring, but it was definitely very emotionally touching, which I suppose could also be a source of creativity, right?
It was awe inspiring because I saw this moment of transition for him. And what more can you ask? To be able to share with people that you care about their moments of transition
Mhm.
they go through. And a lot of that is because they have decided to be creative, decided to be deliberate about their life, to be intentional about their life. All those things that we've talked about today, they've decided to do that. And then when we get to be a part of that, it's a real treasure.
Do you have a specific moment in your life that you thought was especially transformative for you?
Yes, I've told this before. My mother, when I was 11, had a really bad water skiing accident that damaged her back, damaged her legs. So she was in pain the rest of her life. And sometime after that, my grandmother, her mother, who was the matriarch of the family, came to me and said, I mean, I'm 12 years old. I'm 12 years old. And she says to me, you may do anything you want, but do not bring shame to the family name.
Mm-hmm.
And that statement has defined my life ever since, which is I'm totally open to go do whatever it is I need to do. And I'm just going to honor my family in the context of that. So that was the kind of the major turning point. As a 12-year-old, that's when my life's purpose, in essence, defined me all the way up till today. Exploration, openness, creativity, testing boundaries, testing everything, testing God, testing myself, testing my family to see what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's maybe the thing about creativity that is really worth acknowledging.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great guide to live by or guidance.
Yeah, I'm grateful to her and for telling me that. And I have she had 15 grandchildren. She and my grandfather had 15 grandchildren, and I've asked many of them if she had ever said anything like that to them. They said, no, she never said anything like that to me. I said, well, she must have seen something.
Well,
That,
seems like it all turned out very well.
yes, it did. Well, let me ask you one more question, and then we'll be done. Where do you find hope for the future? Do you have hope?
I do have hope, and the people around me, I would say. No, I think as simple as even a smile of a stranger on the street gives you a little bit of hope. But then if you have a good circle of friends around you and a circle of contacts that, as you said earlier, try to have an impact in their local community or even have a positive impact on one person next to them, I think that gives you hope. Um, our ability to feel positive emotions and to have deep bonds with other people, I think that's a great source of hope.
I totally agree with you. I'm really glad to hear that, um, particularly from your generation. Who
Thank you.
I know a lot of young people in your generation, and they don't feel that way. But I'm glad you do, and
Well, there
you
are a lot of reasons that can diminish your sense of hope. Yeah, it's an active it's active work to stay hopeful.
and the intention of being hopeful will lead to the behavior of being hopeful, and it will produce a hopeful life, which will have an impact on other people who will seek to be hopeful
Mhm.
because you have been an influence to them.
Absolutely.
What a better what better way to live.
What better way to live?
Thank you very much for being here. I've enjoyed this. I never know what's going to happen on these shows, and I'm really glad for the conversation we had because I think it will speak to many people about what is possible in the world and possible in their lives. And I wish you really every success and every happiness that comes from the work that you're doing. And I know the work that you're doing with Anthony is really important. And in particular, I look forward to seeing how your team will have an influence upon the world in terms of elevating the value of humanity.
Thank you, Ed. Looking forward to you being part of the process and being part of your purpose and vision for the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for watching. It's great to have you here and look forward to seeing you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.